But the reality is that Argentina was a dying patient on a hospital bed. So it's still, to your comment, it is still expensive for certain things when you compare it to the US or Europe, but it's very inexpensive for other things, real estate, services, meals, what have you, things of that nature.
When we talk about immigrants and numbers, we stop seeing people. But when we put faces to the stories, we can finally feel.
Max, how are you?
Claudio, good morning. How are you?
Good. Man, you speak really good English, but you also, I can see that you have some sort of Argentine intonation, slightly, right? Really hard to detect, but I cannot see it. So are you Argentinian or you are an American that adopted Argentinian culture? Okay,
No, I'm Argentine, born and bred and raised. But my family's from the United States. My grandparents were native New Yorkers, and I went to a bilingual school, so from K to 12. So English was very heavily spoken both at school and at home. In fact, the only course we didn't have in school that was in English was Spanish. But absent that, everything was in English. So that's where that comes from.
So did you ever have the chance to go to the United States or even live in the U.S.? Did you at all, or most of your life was Argentina?
No, I mean, I've always lived here in Argentina. I'm in Buenos Aires. I would spend a month or sometimes more up in the United States during our winter vacation, which is your summer vacation, because my school followed the U.S. curriculum and calendar. I've never lived in the United States, but I've been there any number of times for any number of time. I think I did the math on it. I think I've been to maybe 28 or 30 states, including Hawaii.
Wow, that's interesting. I met people that were born in the U.S. and they moved to Argentina, and that's why they speak the language. But you were the opposite. But
Yeah.
your English is better than mine, 20 times better than mine. And you were born in Argentina. That's impressive. I have
Thank you.
more than 30 years in the U.S. and I'm still not able to speak good and get rid of my accent. So
Right.
really tough. But anyways, so tell me a little bit about you in Argentina. How is your life as being a son of immigrants in Argentina, right? And how was that for you? How was going to school? Was it tough? Or people like you better because of that? Tell me how was that for you? And if, your parents also still living in the U.S. or in Argentina?
No.
Sorry.
My parents are also Argentine. My mother lived for a while in the United States, so she too speaks English. In fact, she's an English professor. My grandmother was an English professor, and my grandmother on my father's side was also an English professor. So, again, English was all over the place. And my time in the United States while on vacation also helped with everything having to do with culture and nuance and the use of idiomatic expressions and colloquialism and all that kind of thing. It also helps that I'm a little bit of a language nerd. I love language, and if I had the chance, I'd study up on more languages. But to your question, Argentina is really no different than the United States in the sense that we're also children of immigrants, all of us, predominantly, or children or grandchildren, really, I should say, predominantly Europe, Spain, Italy, Germany, Great Britain, and of course the United States. At the time that I started my schooling, that school didn't have too many Argentines because it's the international school, which all countries have, where embassy kids and military kids and things of that nature. So I was one of not too many. Later down the line, you had more and more Argentines go to school. But what that school does is it basically prepares you for college or university overseas. I ended up staying here for all of that and for my personal and professional life. Many people that I know, Argentines, went to other countries to live. But it was I'd never really thought of it, but it really never was an issue of do they like me better or don't like me better, whether I'm Argentine or not. The reality is, with a lot of those kids now adults, we pretty much did the entire kindergarten through 12th grade, and we even stay in touch with some of them. My school is about to turn 90 in a few months, and they're doing a big to do over a few days. So it was very much of a mishmash.
Right. Switching topics, I noticed, a lot of one thing I noticed because I've been talking to people from all over the world, but one thing I noticed about Argentina, I guess in the past few years, I don't know if it's because of social media that I notice it more, or it's always been like that, but I notice more immigrants from Europe and the United States specifically too going to Argentina. Is that something you notice too, or
Absolutely.
it's like it's a momentum right now where people want to go to Argentina and see Argentina?
No, it's absolutely true. Obviously, tourism is a big thing because Argentina offers a lot in the way of tourism. Mountains and skiing and beach and the Iguazu Falls, which are one of the wonders of the world. So, wine tasting and all that stuff. So Argentina has a lot to offer in that regard. Now, what you're saying is 100% accurate. And in my line of work, which is receptive real estate, which is to say we help foreigners with acquisition of properties, yes, I see it a lot. And in fact, it's one of the reasons why people flock to Argentina and buy real estate in Argentina. One of the common denominators in my conversations is I don't like the direction my country is going in. Real estate here is expensive, cost of living is expensive. And another thing is people who've never been to Argentina are pleasantly surprised. They didn't expect it to be what it is. They become enamored of it from a cultural standpoint, from an architectural standpoint, from a how far the dollar gets you standpoint. And yes, we see a lot of people. It can be Canada, it can be the United States, it can be places all around Europe, it can be Asia. People who a lot of the time say, I want a different life for my family, my kids, my young kids. I'm concerned about this war or that war. I'm concerned about this president or that president. So for that reason, somehow the world has landed in a place where there's been an inversion in where Argentina has now become safe and popular and easy to access, in addition to real estate being a very precious commodity, but a very affordable commodity for those who come from other countries.
Right. Even if the prices have been going up, I know it's still inexpensive. For other countries, I vacation in Europe and I live in the United States, but even vacationing in Europe, which is more expensive, it's still affordable for at least for an American, right? You don't. It's not a big issue, but it's not as cheaper as it. If it was cheaper, it was better. That's what I'm trying to say. But I was able to vacation in Europe, and it wasn't a big hit for me. I didn't feel it as much. Argentina
Right.
obviously is gonna be better because it's still lower. But for Argentinians, I'm sure that they're not happy because prices are going up. But the prices are going up in the United States too. It's not just
Yeah,
Argentina.
no, you're right. Argentina, the thing about Argentina is that we have an endemic inflation problem, which is now being curbed as a result of the new administration, slowly but surely. As a side comment, our current president, Milei, he is the first ever economist that this country has had as a president. We've never had an economist. We've had lawyers. We've had, of course, military. We've had career politicians. We had one engineer, one doctor, and one dentist. We never had an economist. So in my mind, having an economist is very important to, first of all, to manage a country where the economy, I think, is always one of the most important things, but also secondly, in a country where inflation is a problem. So obviously it's not without its woes, and usually the have-nots are the ones that suffer the most. But the reality is that Argentina was a dying patient on a hospital bed. So it's still, to your comment, it is still expensive for certain things when you compare it to the U.S. or Europe, but it's very inexpensive for other things, real estate, services, meals, what have you, things of that nature.
Right. Before we dive into the real estate stuff, I want to make a comment that I noticed, and I think maybe you would also. I would like to know your opinion because I interview Europeans and Americans that live in Argentina. But one thing I was always tell Americans, and one of the worries that Americans have is when they going abroad, is that they go into a country that is a white country and it's not different than white because they think they get attention. They worry about being different, right? So what I was tell the people that I interview as an Argentinian, when I went abroad, when I went to the U.S., for me, seeing a white person, it was not new. Like I didn't feel like, oh, look, there's a white person. I know that in some countries, in the Americas, a white person goes, it would get attention, right? They pay attention, look at that. But in Argentina, being a white person, you're pretty safe. You could get attention if you are a tourist. Either you could be black, you could be white, you could be brown, doesn't matter. But that could get your attention, but not because of the color of your skin. I think as a white person, you're perfectly safe to go to Argentina and nobody's going to look at you because you're white. What do you think? Is that right?
No, I mean, no one's going to look at you if you're white, and no one's going to look at you if you're black or if you're Asian or anything. I mean, you have more of a chance of people looking at you if you are, as you said, dressed as a tourist with a Hawaiian shirt and a camera
Right.
and black socks and, slippers. That's where they're probably going to look at you more. But no. There's, obviously, if there is a gentleman who's got very, very blonde hair and is 6 feet tall, yeah, they might look at him and say, wow. But no, it's not anything that would ever concern a tourist at all, because this is a country that, in my opinion, is welcoming of foreigners and tourists. But more to the point, I think it's accustomed to it because we have a history, and again, much like the United States, we have a history of immigration.
Right.
One of the forefathers of Argentina, Alberdi, used to say, "Gobernar es poblar," ¿no es cierto? So what we want is to bring the best out of the rest of the world and make a country based on everything else that the world has to offer, which is, interestingly, one of the reasons why our trains and subways run on the wrong side of the tracks, because they were brought in by the English. And up until the 1950s, we would also drive on the wrong side of the road with the steering wheel being on the other end, until Perón came along and said, among many other things, he said, we have our own national identity. So pretty much overnight, that was reversed. Not the trains and the subways, but yes, the cars and other things.
I didn't know that. I just learned something new right now. Thanks for that. I have no idea that was a thing in Argentina. Like we used to, I didn't know.
In fact, I'll tell you something else. There is a statistic somewhere in the city or the province where train accidents sometimes happen when people sometimes cross the railroads when they're not supposed to, and the lights are on and what have you. So instinctively, the first thing you do is you look to the left, but the train is coming on the other side. So it's going to be too late and the train's going to be on top of you, because of course instinctively you're looking to the left where the train coming towards you would be first. So there's a statistic there somewhere about that.
I have no idea about that, and I never noticed.
Yep.
I left
Yep.
in my early 20s, and I just don't. I don't have any memory of thinking of. It's not that it didn't exist. I just never pay attention to it. Like
Oh, yeah, no,
it was natural for me. Like I didn't think it was anything wrong
it's
or different.
it's always been that way, and Argentina has the second subway system in America and the third in the world. We were after London and then New York.
Wow, wow, that's interesting, man. That's very interesting. I learned something new today, so that's pretty cool. Um, so, anyways, let's go. So you are into real estate. I'm pretty sure most people that speak English. Well, I don't know how. I don't know if European English-speaking countries go by real estate, but I know in the United States they call it real estate. Talk about what real estate is and what kind of job you do.
Well, obviously, the concept of real estate is really no different than it is in other parts of the world. There are parts of the world where real estate is something that doesn't require you to be licensed or otherwise be a professional. It's not the case in Argentina. It's actually a university course, which takes 3 years. And you then obviously get a license within the jurisdiction that you want to practice in. In my case, I'm licensed for the city of Buenos Aires, which is my primary market, and then the province of Buenos Aires. But regardless of that, my office liaises with other provinces in an effort to help people who want to buy there. Just last November, I had to travel to Cordoba. There was a gentleman from New Zealand who wanted to buy a house. So we reached out to the broker who was the listing agent, and I met up with him and saw the house, and we did all the due diligence, and we were able to assist this gentleman buy the house. Sight unseen, by the way, which is something that sometimes does happen. And I flew up to Cordoba for the day, signed the deed, moved around the money, and that evening went back home to Buenos Aires. So that said, we operate as a regular real estate firm that advertises property, shows property, rents out property, so forth and so on. But I think that where we stand apart, which is something that really no one else does here, is we cater to the foreigner who is interested in buying real estate in Argentina, for whatever reason that might be. And not only handling the brokerage side of things, which is putting together buyer and seller, or offering our properties, or going out and doing a wider search through the MLS or the various MLSs, because there isn't only one. In addition to that, we have a team of people. We have it all under one umbrella. We sort of compare it to, either Walmart or Amazon, if you will, where you go
Right.
to one place and you have everything. Instead of, okay, now you need to go to the accountant and do this. I don't know any accountant. Now you need to go to this guy and get that. Now you got to go to the bank and find out about the money. We sort of bypass all of that, because also it's someone who doesn't know the market. It's someone who doesn't speak the language, and it's someone who doesn't understand the nuance. And within our service agreements, we have a specific one, which we call the 11th hour clause, wherein someone might say, or think either A, I'll go to Remax because they're in the United States and it's got to be the same thing, which it isn't. Or I'm a seasoned investor of 30 years and I've bought and sold property in London and Zurich and New York and Ottawa, so I can probably do this on my own. Which also becomes a rude awakening, because no, they can't. Argentina has its own set of rules and it's its own animal, and so that's where we come in and help people who either from the get-go avail themselves of our services or down the line. But either way, we assist in all that process.
That's cool. Almost like only one-stop shop for everything.
Exactly, like a one-stop shop. Exactly
That's
right.
good. So, look, I'm thinking about my retirement, and I'm interested on what you have to say about properties
You're
because
retired, man. What that in looking at you, I think that's what 20 or 30 years away. I mean, retirement anytime soon, are you?
no, I'm looking to retire hopefully in the next 2 or 3 years, and I've been thinking about buying in properties in Argentina, right? Uh, so what is the process to buy a property? Like if I want to buy, for me, for example, I'm not interested in the city. I'm interested more of like outside of the bigger population. I want like more a rural, empty space where I can have maybe one or two goats, one cow, be able to bake bread outside and go fishing. That's kind of what I
Okay.
want. Maybe a horse or two. That's kind of what I'm looking for. That's what represents me. And my wife and I, we've been talking about that kind of stuff. So we're planning. I mean, we're thinking. We haven't decided, but we are planning. Argentina is one of the countries on the list. So
hmm Yeah. Well, it's good that you mention a setting which is outside of the urban settings because that allows me to segue into the only real restriction that exists for foreigners. For the most part, there are no restrictions. All you really need is a valid passport and what's called a CUIT, which is a unique tax ID number, which allows both foreigners and Argentines to buy any manner of registrable good, and that can be a car, a house, expensive art, what have you. Um, Now, for the purposes of certain rural lands outside of the city, there is a registry which limits how much land can be owned by foreigners. So let's say Mendoza, and I'm throwing out numbers, I don't know for certain. Mendoza might have a percentage which speaks to of 100% of rural land in the province of Mendoza, only 20% of it can be owned by foreigners. Of that 20%, currently, I don't know, 12% is owned by foreigners. So that'll mean that another 8% can still be sold. Now, it doesn't end there. There is also a restriction to the geographic space where you're buying. For example, if you're a foreigner, you cannot purchase land that is a determined amount of distance from a large body of water. That could be the ocean, that could be a lake, um, as well as a boundary, whether local or international. So there are those restrictions. I've only run into a handful of cases where a deal had to be unfortunately canceled because a foreigner was looking specifically for something that, was right by either, for example, Lago Nahuel Huapi down in Bariloche,
wow,
which is gorgeous
yeah,
and actually sits atop a national preserve. And one other case with a guy from Russia who wanted to buy something in a beach resort, which was maybe, the equivalent of one city block from the ocean, and he wanted to build some manner of like an Airbnb type of thing with a bar on the bottom floor and one of these tiki bar things. I don't know. And he had even asked me to talk to the municipality and see if we could grease them somehow. Or I said, well, you really can't do that. And there were zoning laws. So those are really the only things. But we've had, our most recent case was a Canadian couple who bought something in the province of Jujuy, way up north, because their dream was to have an olive orchard. They wanted to plant olives.
wow. Okay.
So, there's all types of people with all types of dreams, and Argentina, as it is the eighth largest country in the world, you've got more size than you know what to do with for anything having to do with rural settings.
True, man. That was great information. I didn't know there was a limit, right? I wouldn't have that problem because I was born there. So,
Okay.
but for anybody that is not Argentinian, for sure, we have limitation. But I didn't know that was a real thing. Like you could only buy so much, and it was. I mean, it makes sense why they're doing it, but I didn't know. That was great information. I posted a video the other day about talking about the Argentinian financial system, and I was telling I was telling this person from Poland, she lives in Poland, that in Argentina you cannot really get credit, and I guess credit was not the proper way to say it. Someone correct me. I guess you can finance things. I mean, you could, maybe it's not impossible,
Mortgage
but
or
it's,
bank loans.
yeah, really tough. Can you touch on that if you have any experience? I'm sure you do. You have some. So I
Yeah.
want to hear that from you because,
Yeah.
and I also heard in one of your videos talking about, buying things cash. I wanna know how that works.
Yeah. Well, yes, mortgages, bank loans, buying on credit, they are things that are few and far between, but only available to locals. If you are a foreigner coming to Argentina and you're looking to buy something through financing, it's pretty much impossible unless you can get private financing from the seller. If the seller is willing to strike a deal where you can pay, 20% down and the rest of it over 2, 3 years, sure, that can be done. Very difficult to find a seller who would do that. Very difficult. But for foreigners, it's next to impossible to get any manner of financing for the very simple reason that they have no credit history in Argentina. So no one's gonna offer them any kind of financing. Now, for locals, it is available. It isn't an easy thing to get. You have to jump over several hoops. But yeah, people do get loans, sometimes for a larger percentage of the property, other times for a lower percentage of the property. And to your other comment, yes, this is the single most kind of jarring cultural aspect of Argentina. Purchases of real estate are done cash on the barrelhead. And when I say cash on the barrelhead, it means if you're buying a property of $150,000, most of the time you have to transfer the money into Argentina, take the money in a satchel or knapsack or whatever. It sounds much more movie-like than it actually is,
Mm-hmm.
and take it from there to where the sale is going to take place, which could be a notary's office, could be a finance firm, uh, what have you. And the money, once there, is counted. If you're lucky, you have a machine. If you're not lucky, you have to count bill by bill. And I've been privy to both of those. Now, again, every time I say this to a client, they have the same kind of smile you have, or they're looking at me
Yeah.
weird. And yeah, it's just part of the folklore and culture. We are still a cash culture. And I think that has been that way and hasn't yet changed for two reasons. One of them is more pragmatic than the other, but one of them is cultural, to where us Argentines, we like to touch, we like to see the bills, we like to look at them, we like to make sure they're there. And the other reason is more possibly pragmatic, to where or a lot of the time when someone sells their property, they turn around and buy something else. They're selling it to buy something else. Now, this kind of transaction, I would say 9 times out of 10 is how it's done. The other 10th time, you might find someone who will take it directly into their bank, from my bank, let's call it Chase, to your bank, let's call it Bank of America, push a button. Everyone says, yeah, the money arrived. You sign the title, and it is formally, possession is given, title is changed over to the buyer's name. Now, in our line of work, in our specific niche, given that we work with both sellers and buyers, both of whom are foreign more often than not, that statistic gets a little bit better, to the tune of 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10, to where 3 out of 10 can be done through a wire transfer, which makes things cheaper, easier, it's less of a headache, literally push of a button, and that's it. But yes, I would say the most jarring thing is the fact that it's a cash culture, but it doesn't really sway anyone away from it. They understand it. We explain it to them. We explain the actual process of how we're going to move the money, how we're going to
Right.
bring the money into Argentina, obviously in legal fashion, and yeah, that becomes the process.
Right. If you live in the United States, you might be able to, get the money financed through the U.S. bank, and then you pull that money out. You tell them you need the money on hand, and just transfer it over there. So that's one way you can do it. In European countries, might not be the case. Every country has different way, but I can speak with experience. Depends on your salary. Excuse me, and your salary, your income. You could get $150,000 loan.
Yeah.
And you just go buy a house.
Oh yeah, we've seen clients do that. We've seen clients say,
Right,
I can get a loan for 150 or 200, and the interest rate is so low that there's no question about the fact that this is the way to buy the property. And
right,
when they see the pricing of properties in very good areas, you can buy anything from a one bedroom to a two bedroom or even a studio, starting at $80,000 all the way up to, 200, 250.
right.
Obviously, there's properties for 500, for $1 million. Peter Thiel recently purchased a house for $12 million, and I think he's now actually here with his family living. So there's a wide range of properties.
So, in comparison to the U.S., if you know this question, the answer to this question, the credit, because you say if you don't have any credit in Argentina, people won't give you anything. Well, in the United States, we have a credit system, right? Where you have your social security number, and
Yeah.
everything you purchase is on that is a record on that number. So when you apply for a loan, they look at your number, they look at your record, say, well, this guy, we can loan money because everything he buys, he pays off, and they give you a number, a score, right? Either 600, 700. So the higher your number, the better loans you can get, better interest. In comparison to Argentina, do they have something similar, or they don't have anything? It's just like a word to
No,
mouth type of
no.
thing.
We have something similar. I wouldn't call it a scoring system as such, where they say, okay, you've scored so much, so we can give you this amount of money. But it is a system. I mean, it's very similar, but not in the sense of a score. It's
Right.
similar in the way of, okay, tell me, let's get your social security number, which is the CUIT. Tell me where you work. Tell me how much you make. Tell me what kind of a loan you want. Tell me what it's for. Tell me what the price of the property is. And a lot of times it'll depend on the bank, and it'll depend on, if how much money you make, and if you can prove that you make that amount of money. Those will be the factors that will depend on which kind of a loan you will get, if you are, viable to get a loan.
Interesting. I never bought anything on credit in Argentina because I left very young, but that was good information. Um, that was good. I had another question for you. Oh, okay. It just came to my mind. So I wanted to talk to you about investing, investing in properties versus buying to live in there, right? Do you see a lot of people going? I know you say people are going for different reasons, but you can get one person that buys for investment, another one buys for living. But where is the biggest percentage? Are people buying more to live, or they buying more to invest? And if they're buying more to invest, what are the benefits to invest in Argentina in apartments, rentals?
Okay. Well, to the first question, I would say it's more or less split down the middle. Some people and some people even buy two places to do both, one for themselves and one for an investment property. So I would say that that's pretty much split down the middle, in part because of what we were talking about earlier about, I don't like the direction my country is going in, and I'm enamored with Argentina, and so forth and so on. But also, the biggest reason for the investment is a capital gains move, which is to say, you're buying during a down market, which is slowly going up, but it still is a down market with plenty of supply. And you can keep it over years, and it'll garner value. The exact opposite, really, of what a car does. You drive out of the lot, and the car is immediately worth $5,000 less. Now here you buy property, and over time, it starts to go up. To say nothing of if it's in one of the ABC areas, Recoleta, Palermo, so forth. Now, for those that choose to use it solely or in addition to a capital gains, but have it use it as to get a short-term return on the investment, you basically have, I would say, two options before you. One of them is the long-term lease agreement, which we call locación residencial, wherein the person, or well, we or whomever really puts it on the market, offers it as a lease, which is minimum 2-year lease. And under that format, the tenant furnishes it himself, pays all the utilities in addition to the monthly rental, which generally speaking, as of right now, would possibly garner somewhere between 5 and 6%. So not necessarily fantastic, but also not the worst ROI that you can find. Also with the added benefit that you have something which is yours, no one can take away from you, and is garnering value every day down the line. The other option before these people, these types of investors, is the short-term route. I'm going to Airbnb it out. Now, yes, you can make more money that way because you've got much in the same way hotels will have it. You have a nightly rate, you have a weekly rate, you have a bi-weekly rate. So that will garner you more money, to be sure. But there's two things to consider. The first one is there is an overabundance of short-term and Airbnbs because as a result of a few years ago now, everybody and their brother felt, well, I can put a TV and I can put a bed and I can get an Airbnb and I can make money in dollars out of it. But the real winners there, the super host, the guy who's got a unique piece of property in a unique setting, the guys who are tried and true and know how to offer it, those are the guys that make the money. So you can't just up and say, I'm going to set up an Airbnb. You've got to do the benchmarking, the due diligence,
Right.
the nice furniture, the good services, the extra fast Wi-Fi, etc. So that's problem number one. You've got a lot of competition. Problem number two is that under that format, the owner, you as the owner, are paying electric, gas, water, internet, HOAs, and then the maid, and then the cleanup, and then the cleaning items. And again, Argentina does have still an endemic inflationary problem. So you have to sort of put both of those things on the balance sheet and say, okay, what's my bottom line? And at the end of that bottom line, what ROI did it yield? So today, as of now, when someone asks me the question of how to go about investing, I would say without a shadow of a doubt, do the long-term rental, let the tenant pay for everything. You get a steady stream of income in US dollars or in euros or in whatever currency you want, because that's another thing. Up until a couple of years ago, you necessarily had to set up the contract in Argentine pesos. You no longer need to do that. So you can now do, in addition to many other things that benefit in any given contract, the owner, in addition to the tenant, but also protect the owner. So my advice is always that right now, go for the long-term rental. Of course, that's not really an option for many people who say, I want to be a snowbird, so I want to go in November, December, January, February to the Argentina.
Right.
So they necessarily have to have it furnished. They necessarily have to pay the bills. But there's options, because at that juncture, you can have what's called a corporate rental, to where, Claudio, you buy a place and you say, I'm going to be there January through September. Perfect. And then when you leave, October through December, it can be rented out in corporate fashion, which is to say someone who pays monthly and or
Right.
pays utilities. It can be negotiated.
Yeah. Very interesting information, and I'm not surprised about a similar situation. I'm not surprised about what you're saying, because a similar situation is happening in the U.S. where, if you have your property through Airbnb and are looking to invest in two properties in Orange Beach, Alabama, and the reason why I didn't do it, one, because what I noticed as a consumer, that hotel prices did not drop, but Airbnb prices went up because of all the stuff you say, the cost, utilities, the cleaning fee, and all this stuff. So I was thinking, okay, so it used to be a business to do Airbnb, but now I think the long term rental makes more sense. It's more safe, right? It's a slower way to get your return your money back, right? Because Airbnb you can make way more money, but the reality is I think the consumers are more, they don't see the difference between a hotel and an Airbnb. And a hotel, I get everything is there. Everything I need is there. You get a pool, you get a bar, everything is right there.
There is that. And there is a segment of people that prefer hotels, but there's a large segment of people that, and we've heard this over and over again, they prefer the non-sterile lived-in setting of an apartment, of a Buenos Aires apartment. But yes, again, it is a business. You can do well for yourself with Airbnbs. There are people who've bought and turned them into Airbnbs, and they've got 5 and 10 and 15, and they do very well for themselves because they've cornered knowing what it is that people like. And I'll tell you something else. There are people who have got it down so well that they cater only to Europeans, or only specifically to the French, or only specifically to the Swiss, or
Right.
only specific to North Americans, Canada, the US, or only to the Latino market. It really depends on that. We have been doing Airbnbs for a number of years. We're slowly kind of going away from it because we favor more the consultancy and the sales and purchase, of course, but we also do the long-term rentals. And when our clients who buy something with us then want us to rent it out, yes, our immediate recommendation is let it sit there, let it garner value over money, let's rent it out, get that steady stream of income, which they can pay to you up in the States via Zelle or to Europe via Wise, and it becomes a much easier proposition.
Max, I think I asked you all the question. This was a very interesting and very informative podcast. It's actually something I'm looking into and I'm interested in. I gained good information from you. Thank you for that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And look, I don't mind doing another one later. I think people
Sure.
would like to have this kind of information. I got educated today, so thank you for
Oh,
your time.
thank you again for having me and for letting me talk about something which I really like. So it has been my pleasure.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.